Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new malicious compliance stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
The first story is titled Accidental $40,000 Bonus. I have a former boss who used to be a youth pastor. He clashed with the head pastor over a number of things. The one I can remember was telling the boss and the staff that copying MS software was stealing back before MS had installed keys on everything. He finally brought up too many things to the board of trustees or whatever, and was fired in one swift move, no notice, get a box. He couldn't get a final check out of them, because something like they had a big admin shift and everyone thought it was someone else's job to check, or something. He went to the labor board finally, and had a conversation something like, "So tell me about this job. I run Sunday activities, weekdays I plan activities, make calls, kids visit me, I fill other duties during the week. Summers there are camps, in-house day camps, overnighters, beach days, etc. So were there days you worked more than 8 hours? In the summers? So many. But that's the job. I knew that when I took it. You don't seem to understand that your hourly rate doesn't qualify your employer to count you as salaried. You're owed overtime for all of these extra hours all those years." So by doing things the correct way, he got an extra $40,000 from the employer. The next story is titled In-Kind Donations of Garbage. I volunteered for a political campaign when I was in college. It's a terrible, unpaid job with long hours and nothing but miserable people. I did it because it was a graduation requirement. I worked in the compliance department, which consisted primarily of checking in campaign donations, and ensuring that the donor was legally permitted to donate. On occasion, we would receive an envelope returned to us by some enraged individual expressing his or her disapproval of our candidate. Usually these letters just consisted of torn-up donor forms, typically covered with badly scrawled and terribly misspelled threats and expletives. But every now and then, someone would weigh down the prepaid return envelope, so that it would cost the campaign more money to receive their return. Usually, it meant that the respondent stuffed the envelopes with paper clips or similar low-value metallic items. These tactics usually added somewhere in the neighborhood of $0.0002, so not exactly effective, but it was still very mildly annoying. By law, all donations, in kind or otherwise, must be logged and reported. This means that we have to report your donation even if you've donated something non-monetized. This, of course, includes donations of office supplies. So I, being the upstanding citizen I am, complied with reporting standards. If I received an envelope weighed down with some variety of low-value item, i.e. paperclips, I'd estimate the number of paperclips received, looked up their value on Staples or other office supply websites, and then checked in the customer's in-kind donation. Our campaign fastidiously sent thank you letters to all donors, and reported all donations to the supervisor of elections. Instead of costing the campaign money as intended, these individuals instead received a thank you note for their donations, and their kindness was memorialized in public records. The next story is titled Security Shenanigans, The Step of Hell. Backstory: so in my first year, 2017-ish, of doing security, I started working for a male gay club and absolutely loved every second of it until the general manager and owner came in and saw me a female security guard in his gay club. To even get into this club, if you were a female, you had to sign a contract saying that there was no heterosexual activities, that you only had access to one dance floor, and tbh some other ridiculous rules like you couldn't dance close with a male, i.e. grind on him, etc. Being from a large LGBTQI family, I had a great time working there, did my job decently, enjoyed new connections, and even saw my dad making out with a dude. My eyes never recovered, not that I'm unsupportive, but there's boundaries. He started making special rules up like, after shift you can't have a knockoffs, a drink after work. Which is fine, some venues are different to others and I'm not a huge drinker, but after 7 hours of some of the stuff we have to put up with a drink defs helps to relax you for bed. But then I started to realize that these rules only applied to me. Then one day he made a rule that females could only be in a static position. Again I copped it, said okay cool, can do. Still dealt with situations when they came up. Until he said, your job is to stand on this step, don't move from this step, if you need help radio one of the boys. This is where my MC kicked in. For 7 hours I didn't move from that step. I didn't break up the fight that happened right in front of me. Instead called for the boys on my faulty radio, and watched the show. The drunk guy passed out violating their liquor license, sat there for 2 hours whilst the rover never saw him. I even fell because the step once BC was that narrow, but I kept 1 foot on that step. About a month in, I'm one of the guys that got glassed. When someone smashes a glass or glass bottle onto another person's head. The night before had called the cops. A cop came in undercover, tried to talk to me, trying to get me down, saying he had a problem. I kindly explained I couldn't leave my step because of my lovely boss. He explained who he was and I did the sorry I can't help. But stepped off the step to show him the conditions of the workplace. My boss came not 2 minutes later and gave me an amazing tongue lashing to the point of, if you get off that step one more time I will be dismissing you and you will never have work with the company you're with. He later didn't pay my wages to my company for that shift because I didn't do my job satisfactory, and I talked to the cop for 5 minutes not watching the crowd. I left after this. The policeman recorded it all on his phone and disappeared. When I knocked off, someone approached me on my way to my car, which was common cause. Everyone knew you would catch me after my shift, showed me his badge ID and all that. Off the club's cameras, took my details for a report and got the club owner for neglect of patrons, a whole load of work safe stuff, and even got him for sexual discrimination. Even got a payout of $10K for loss of income and slander. The next story is titled, Stop Using Headphones. Okay. So, the main reason I wear headphones is because I don't want to get judged by the music I listen to or the videos I watch. I'm kind of sensitive that way. So, I was drawing on my computer one day, listening to music. The volume wasn't that loud, but you know with headphones it's pretty hard to hear around you. So, I was drawing, then I thought I heard something weird go on with the beat or a lyric. I just shrugged it off. A couple minutes later, my mum burst into my room, without knocking, and started screaming at me. I hurriedly paused my music and turned to her, confused but mainly annoyed at her because she didn't bother giving me a warning. So I asked her, "Can't you bother knocking first?" I probably shouldn't have yelled this, as this kind of set her off more. "Mum, I was calling you for like 5 minutes. Turn the volume down on those headphones." Note that on my computer, the volume was set to around 4 or 6, so it wasn't really that loud. Me, they are not loud. "What do you want?" "Mum, the neighbor's dog is in the yard again." "Go get your father." Me, "Why don't you go get him?" So, me and my mother got into a screaming match that lasted around 10 minutes. It ended with her storming out of my room and saying, "Don't use those headphones anymore," and she slammed the door shut. Now, I love headphones, and I'm sure a lot of you guys too as well. Her saying this made me pretty pissed. I was originally going to put the headphones back on and not obey her when an idea popped up. She didn't want me wearing headphones. Well, of course, mother. So about an hour after our argument, everything seemed to calm down. I put all my headphones in a drawer and looked on YouTube for a song to play. When I found a God song I really liked, I turned the volume all the way up and clicked play. Music blasted through my speakers and my mother sure as hell heard it. After about a minute in, my mother burst into my room again, without knocking, and screamed at me to turn the music off. I stopped the music, turned to her with a smug look on my face and said, "You said no headphones. I'm not using headphones, so what's the big deal?" After that, I got my headphone privileges back. My ears did hurt while the song was playing, but it was worth it. The next story is titled, Petsmart MC. So last time I bought pet food, I got given a coupon at the store to get 10% off my next purchase by a certain date. Since pet food costs me hundreds of dollars each trip, this was worth using. So on the last day I remember to go use it. Load up the cart with $500 of crap. Get to the checkout and of course everything is full pandemic mode now. It's way more difficult to actually get everything scanned etc. with their new rules. It's like a 5-minute affair now per person. So after all that, I hand the cashier the coupon and she says this is for online pickup orders only. I'm like, are you kidding me? So I told her if I leave and go order everything for pickup from my car then they'll honor it. So I go to my car, call the store, say their website isn't working, I'd like to place an order for pickup. Sure, what would you like? I'd like the cart full of stuff I left at the front, I'll be in a minute to pay. Godam, worth it for $50. The next story is titled, Small-Minded Bureaucrat Wants Me to Know the Law. When I first graduated from college, I moved to a nearby state for a new job. I'm in the US. Because I am a civic-minded person, and because a presidential election was coming up, I wanted to register to vote in my new state. In those days, before internet, you had to go to the city hall of the town, city in which you resided and fill out the paperwork at the office of the registrar of voters. I only needed my driver's license and/or social security card to do so. The election came and went, and I voted, so all was fine. Or so I thought. About 2 weeks after the national presidential election, I received a phone call. It was the registrar of voters from the city in which I lived. She had apparently finally gotten around to actually reading my voter registration and now had decided that she needed more information. She informed me that I was not eligible to vote, as I had been born in another country. I explained to her that, while I was indeed born in another country, I was born to 2 American parents, and thus by birth was an American citizen. She paused, then told me I had to bring in my naturalization papers to show her. I explained to her that I have no naturalization papers because I have never been naturalized. I'm an American citizen at birth. Remember that the registrar of voters is supposedly a person whose job it is to know the rules about voter eligibility. She insisted that I needed naturalization papers. I reminded her that children born to an American parent, only one is actually needed to be a citizen, are automatically American citizens. Moreover, while some countries of one's birth might provide dual citizenship, the country of my birth, Switzerland, does not. So we went back and forth for a while. She doubled down and kept insisting I needed naturalization papers while I tried to explain US citizenship laws. I also pointed out to her that if she believed voter fraud had occurred, it was too late anyway, as I had already voted. Finally, she said I had to bring in those papers or my birth certificate within 2 weeks or I'd be expunged from the voter rolls. Here's where the malicious compliance comes in. When an American baby is born abroad, her parents are supposed to report the birth at the nearest US embassy or consulate so that a consular report of birth abroad (CRBA) can be issued as an official record of the child's claim to US citizenship or nationality. I have one of those. It's written in English. But the registrar of voters didn't ask for my CRBA. Nope. She demanded my birth certificate. So that's what I brought into her. The beautiful birth certificate written entirely in French, which I was pretty sure she could not read. I gave it to her, just as she had asked. As I did, I asked her if she knew French, and no surprise, she did not. And then I watched her try to read it. She studied that piece of paper for about 2 minutes and, knowing that I had complied with her ridiculous request, finally just stammered out an okay, this is fine. It's not much, but I enjoyed her reaction. She had no way of knowing what it was that I presented to her, but I gave her exactly what she demanded. In retrospect, who knows what I could have shown to her. But that's what happens when bureaucrats get a little taste of power, more than their small-minded brains can handle. The next story is titled, "You Didn't Clean It Well Enough." Context, backstory, whatever you call it, I'm an apprentice electrical fitter machinist. I hook up motors and such and occasionally have to fabricate brackets and parts. One of the machines I sometimes use is called a lathe. This is the machine in question. Another guy who works at this company, who I call crap for brains, but we'll call him Jim for now, likes to think he owns the place and all the machines in it, and likes to push people around, namely me. He's a bit of an idiot and nobody really likes him. I had used the lathe to make a part, cleaned up my mess to an acceptable standard and left the machine. My supervisor then later got a phone call from him about how I didn't leave the lathe in a clean enough condition and I need to come back and fix it. Now, I've left the machine in a clean enough condition as we always do, all my mess was cleaned and it was wiped down. Sometimes small bits of cuttings get stuck in corners and such, but that's just the life of a machine tool and it's expected, it just joins the rest of the cuttings. Cue, malicious compliance. Jim berated me over this. Absolutely yelled and screamed about how I don't leave his machines, readers, company's machines, in good enough condition and I never show him any respect. So I took to cleaning the lathe, the best goddamn cleaning of its life. I took solvent to it, cleaned all the old grease and coolant off, wiped this thing down so well you could actually see the original paint again rather than just the standard workshop grime. I stripped all the oil off it, got a toothbrush and cleaned every single corner, bolt head and nook on it. Every bit of exposed chrome on it was polished till you could see yourself in it. I spent a good amount of time cleaning out the chip tray, which is where all the crap lands and never ever gets cleaned because its very purpose is to get dirty. During this whole job Jim has watched on. This grand cleanup job has taken 6.5 hours so far. And I'm still not done. All of this cleaning had made quite a mess on the floor, so I've had to go and clean that up too. I've then had to go and oil it again since I've just cleaned all the oil off. 8 hours later, and we're done. It looks like it just left the factory floor and I'm quite proud of my work. Jim says I've done a good enough job and I can leave. Home I go for the day. Come the end of the week we have to hand in our timesheet. My entire Wednesday is just written down as lathe cleaning, see Jim. I've cost the company $600 for my time and another $50 in cleaning supplies and oil so I could clean this machine. As expected, the supervisor and boss went to talk to Jim and myself about why it's taken me so long to clean the lathe. I explained. Jim said I hadn't done a good enough job, despite it being to an acceptable standard, so I had to spend the whole day cleaning. The supervisors and boss were not happy. I'd like to say Jim got into crap for this, but for some dumb reason Jim has immunity around here and never ever gets reprimanded for anything. Either way, that's how I cost the company a day's labor for just doing something that doesn't actually net the company any money. The next story is titled, Stay Here? You got it. So back when I was in elementary school, I used to be quite a troublemaker. Principal's office, calls home, etc. Mostly for roughhousing with my friends, nothing serious or bad. So there I was, around 3rd, 4th grade, on the playground with my friend. For reference, my elementary school playground comprised of a hardtop, jungle gym, and a field. Surrounding the playground was maybe 20 feet of trees, and then fences. Beyond that was either houses, railroad tracks, or woods. So the rule was, no going into trees, for our safety. Even on the inside of the fences, going beyond the fences was a cardinal crime. Yet on that day my friend and I went into the trees, probably to be cool or whatever. And subsequently we got caught by a lunch lady. They supervised our recess. Don't know why. As punishment, she told us to stand on the blacktop and not move until she told us to. Done. So recess came and went, and then the lunch ladies formed lines, and everyone went inside. Except she forgot to tell us we could move. And so we stayed there, standing on the hard top like she told us to. The playground was empty for 10 minutes, then the next round of kids came out. Maybe 10 or so minutes later the original lunch lady noticed we were there. What were we still doing outside? Miss, we're just standing here until you say we can move, like you told us. She shooed us in right after that. Neither her or my teacher ever punished me for complying. The next story is titled, It's a Worm, Not a Snake. When I was in Year 7 or Form 1, I was unfortunately attending a highly religious, stifling, private school that was known as Insert Suburb Concentration Camp by many attendees. I was a preacher's kid and high standards were expected of me, but as an early atheist and rebellious teenager I was having none of it. We had a very obnoxious textiles teacher. I hated textiles anyway, but this idiot made it 10 times worse. She would physically spank the kids in class that she didn't like, which was humiliating to them at that age, and she was ridiculously religiously indoctrinated. We made a snake out of various colored materials from a pattern that indicated it was indeed a snake, forked tongue and all. Once completed, we were asked to name our snake. However, owing to the Christian hatred of snakes, a relic of the Garden of Eden doctrine, we were not allowed to acknowledge that they were snakes. Instead, we were forced to regard them as worms. Of course, I named my worm Lucifer. When the teacher acted aghast and informed me she wouldn't accept that name, I stuck to my guns. Lucifer was the name of my worm and it wasn't against the rules. She had to accept it. Later that year, after her brief speech on why Xmas was taking the Christ out of Christmas, I spent our card making sessions crafting a gorgeous card. I'm quite good at illustrations, depicting her being spanked by Jesus dressed in Santa drag, telling her to be a good girl for Xmas or she was going to get it. This didn't go down quite as smoothly. I was given corporal punishment, though not by her. Apparently she had read the card, torn it into pieces and had a nervous breakdown. Not long after, there was a rule that anyone engaging in balloon or pistol-based water fights would be expelled. It was summer. We were bored. I initiated spitting water fights. Fill your mouth up with water and spit it. Very unhygienic, I know, but there were no pandemics then. So I engaged a frenemy in this fight, and as she rounded a corner I spat the entire contents of my mouth into the imagined proximity of my target. Turns out she was a fast runner and I got the strictest teacher of the school right in the face instead. Me hussy, not even going to bother altering names as I'm sure she's dead now, cried to me in the office that she couldn't give me corporal punishment because she had RSI. This didn't surprise me, considering she was the prime administrator of said punishments. I couldn't help but be amused. I may have sniggered. However, talks between my parents and the school administration were not successful, and thankfully I was pulled out and transferred elsewhere. The next story is titled, I Just Need a Number. Long ago, at a Fortune 500 company far away, I had a consulting gig with Giganto Corp, helping them code their Java 1.0 web app. My first task was to update the app's UML diagrams, which were manually maintained and required per the process. I got out of that task as quickly as I could by just putting it off and writing code instead, and nobody ever complained that the diagrams, which had been out of date when I was hired, continued to be out of date. But I think that since they had given someone the task, my boss was able to check it off and claim compliance with the process. Not malicious compliance, but that's just setting the scene for what kind of workplace this was. The actual malicious compliance comes later. Giganto liked to rotate their middle managers around routinely, whether things were going well or not. I never knew whether this was to give them more experience in different departments, or limit the damage that any one manager could do in one place, or what. But partway through the gig our middle manager got rotated out, and new manager decided we had to have was a Gantt chart. UML diagrams and Gantt charts, a clear recipe for success, and the project would be a shining beacon of new managers' abilities. One of the things you have to have for a Gantt chart is numbers. New manager needed, or at least his Gantt chart software required, for every task we had done, its estimate, and the actual time it took. He also needed estimates for incomplete tasks. And, of course, the dependencies between tasks. Now, for all the process this place had, they didn't have any tracking of the time taken on a task. Not on software, not in a spreadsheet, not on index cards. Nothing. Programming lead assigned tasks, we did tasks, moved on to the next one. So where was new manager going to get his numbers? In a meeting, of course. We all gathered for the meeting of numbers. For each task, new manager would name the task, and then the developer who did it would say how long it took. DB component for account table? 1 week. UI component for account selection? In progress for 2 days, 4 days left. And so it went, until new manager impaled me on a task from my past. Controller for account configuration? I did that, but I don't know how long it took. You don't? No, that was months ago. I really don't remember. But I need a number. I'm sorry, any number I gave you would be made up. You probably don't want a made-up number, do you? His frustration was starting to show. No, of course not. But I have to have a number. His face turned red and he hit the table with a closed fist. 1. I just need a number. Finally, the light bulb went off in my poor confused brain. Having only once said he wouldn't accept a made-up number, he had said 3 times, and loudly, that he needed a number. 3 is more than 1, so 4.53 days. Okay. Thanks. The other, smarter developers were probably making up many of their numbers also, just with less fuss than I made out of it. Gantt charts are of questionable usefulness in software, and with the data he was getting, probably even less useful. I think it's a sure bet that the Gantt chart was useless in predicting when the project would be done. But contractors being expensive jettisonable pods, I left the project before it was finished, and never found out for sure how it turned out. I thought that only happened in movies. I've never seen it in any business setting before or since. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe to the channel and post some bear emojis in the comment.